Quick play.
Welcome to Quick Play. Sam the Storm Beagle here, and today we are here to review The Empire Strikes Back for the Atari. Quick Play is part of the Retrotopia podcast group, and you can find the main weekly show wherever you get your podcasts. But before we begin the show, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and if you want to join in on the conversation, you can find our socials and everything, all the Retrotopia crew, at linktree/Retrotopia. That's linktr.ee/Retrotopia. So now, without further delay, let's get to the game. All right, we are here to talk about The Empire Strikes Back for the Atari. It was developed by Parker Brothers and developed and published by Parker Brothers. It was released in 1982 for the Atari 2600 and then the Intellivision in 1983. I think that's such a cool console name, the Intellivision, because it's like television, right? Anyways, the story or the plot, there's not much of one. It's basically you're Luke Skywalker and you're battling the AT-AT walkers during the Battle of Hoth, and that's the entire game. You're in a snowspeeder traveling from it's right to left because the goal of the walkers is to destroy the power generator, which is what's happening in the Battle of Hoth in the movie. So I guess from that perspective, it's true to the movie. But your object is to destroy as many of the walkers as possible by hitting the body or the head of the walker, and shots to the leg do not damage them. So I guess ironically that's the opposite of the movie, because the shielding on the walkers, they couldn't use their blasters and they had to use the tow cables on the legs. So this is exactly the opposite. You need to stop the walkers from reaching and destroying the generator, like I mentioned, and the game ends when you either use up all of your 5 lives that you have or the walkers destroy the generator. And one of those conditions will inevitably happen, and that's how the game ends. It is not much of a game. Walkers will change from black, like the sprite of the walker, I guess, or they're very, very large pixels. This is not a very graphically complex game. It's very blocky. It's pretty simple. But the walkers change colors to indicate damage before they explode. So they go through a bunch of different colors and then finally explode. Your score is counted on the bottom of the screen, but I don't think it's saved at all. So if you're, playing this game, I think you have to just kind of remember what your score was and write it down. The only point of this game, I think, is to try to beat your previous score because, as I mentioned, the only possible outcomes of the game is you run out of little ships to fly or they destroy your generator. Music? Music. There is no music. When you start the game, it plays a little bit of the Star Wars theme, just like a little Atari jingle of the Star Wars theme, and then after that there's no fucking music this whole time. So if you get pretty good at this game and you can play it for an extended period of time, you're just listening to the sound effects go like that sound that old video games made for explosions, and that's about it. There's no music in the background, which I guess is maybe a mercy, because some of those games that had just really repetitive background music really got irritating. So who knows? It could be a blessing and a curse. The graphics, man, I guess maybe they were good at the time, but no one's looking at this now and thinking like, man, that was a really beautiful, well put together game. Not like nowadays where we look back at 16-bit graphics and, look at something like, I don't know, Sonic or Link to the Past or whatever fill in the blank old game, even going back to the NES. Brian and I just talked about Shadow of the Ninja. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but we recorded a chat about Shadow of the Ninja on the NES, and it's like, it's an old game, but it looks good. For its time, and aesthetically there's stuff like The Messenger. I'm getting off topic, but there really isn't that much else to say about this game and the graphics are just flat, big blocky pixels. You can kind of tell. I mean, the walkers are pretty easy to tell what they are, what they look like. The snow speeder kind of is, I guess, snow speeder looking. But other than that, there's just kind of like a white snow background and then a light blue sky above it, and and that's it. And it just scrolls from left to right, and there's really not much to it. I guess if you're gonna pick a movie scene, you got like the white on white on light blue of Hoth. It's like there's really not much of a color palette to work with. Difficulty, it's not hard. I mean, it is hard. It gets challenging, obviously. It's not hard to jump in and just play it, but it's really mindless and repetitive. So you're doing the same thing over and over again, and the walkers steadily get faster. So it starts out, you get the hang of the controls. You can move back and forth. You can fire your weapon, and you can hit the walker. It can shoot at you, so you have to kind of try to avoid that as best you can, and just kill as many of them as you can. And then they start coming faster, so you have to kill them even faster. Eventually, they're going to hit you enough times that you're going to die a bunch, and that's pretty much it. So I don't think it's particularly difficult, but I think it would be difficult to master to the point where you're getting, an incredibly high score. But again, like, the game doesn't record the high score, so it's not like, I mean, you'd basically just have to tell everyone that you got, whatever X amount score on this game, and they go, okay, sure, prove it, and then you can't. So no way to tell, unless you're emulating, and then you've got, maybe a save state, or take a picture of it or whatever. But back in the 80s, I don't imagine that anyone was playing this game over and over again because they loved it so much. I think it was just some dumb fun for a couple minutes. Replay, I guess, kind of a funny story. This was along with, I think I've mentioned this on the main show. Some of the main, or the first games that I played as a little kid were Super Mario Brothers on the NES and Duck Hunt. I mean, those two were together on the same cartridge for me. And then 1943, which is kind of an odd game, but we had a port of it on the NES. And this game, oddly enough, I think we were at my grandparents' house once when I was real little, and my dad had his old Atari downstairs, and I was probably like, I don't know, 4, and plugged it in and just let me mess around with it a little bit. But I do remember this game distinctly. I think this was one of my first video game memories, which is kind of funny to think about because it's such a crummy, random, like, licensed game for the Atari, like shortly before the home console crash in the early to mid 80s. This was not a great game. There's only one level. Like, going through these notes, like, we have level types and here there's no levels. It's just one level, and you can only lose it. Which I guess is kind of par the course for what happens in the movie. They kind of stuck to the movie, right? The rebels kind of were routed at the Battle of Hoth and had to escape. So there's no escape for you. You're gonna die. Positives of this game. We'll get to the review and close this thing out. I'm just laughing because it's such a bad game. There's really no positives at all. If you want dumb, repetitive fun, or not even fun, it's not even fun. If you just want, like, dumb, repetitive gameplay, you can play this to your heart's content. It's quick to jump into. There's very little commitment to it. It's just blasting walkers and moving on to the next one until they eventually kill you. Negatives, it's very boring and one-dimensional. There's not any variety to the gameplay. It just repeats. But I did want to mention this because I was laughing so hard at this last night when I was looking up some information for this game. This famously crotchety sci-fi author, Harlan Ellison, gave, for some fucking reason, a review of this game. Like, I can't imagine, like, this is a guy from kind of the I don't know if you call it like the golden age of sci-fi, but like he wrote in the like Strange Tales and like the pulp magazines, and wrote a bunch of short stories, and is a really prolific sci-fi author, very well known, wrote some episodes of Star Trek. So anyways, they have him play this game, and his review is gold. Pulled a couple of quotes from it. He called it a shamelessly exploitative little toy, the latest icon of an imbecile industry. This is great. Has the potential to emerge as the most virulent electronic botulism of all. And he called the game an analog for the myth of Sisyphus. If you're up on your Greek mythology, Sisyphus is the guy who was banished to Hades, and he's got to like roll the stone up the hill every day, and then it rolls back down. So he is in a no-win scenario, much like this game. I just eviscerated this game, this old sci-fi author. So I thought that was pretty funny, and probably the best part of talking about this game is thinking about this guy playing this game and then being absolutely disgusted with it. Yeah, the Unforgivable, I guess, like on a home console game, maybe you can forgive it a little bit. But just that it's a 0-win scenario. There's no way to complete the game at all. And I guess you could say that for arcade games, and this, the early home consoles like the ColecoVision and the Atari and Television and et cetera, had these games that were either arcade ports or very arcade style. And so I guess it wouldn't be uncommon to play a game where it's just repetitive like this, and you're trying to go for a high score and you die. Just as a movie tie-in, I don't know. It's weird to think about nowadays. I guess maybe I'm looking at it with a modern lens. But we'll give this a score. I'm going to give it a 1.5 out of 10. It is a bad game. Just one of the many bad movie game adaptations that are out there. Worth playing if you're curious and you've got a way to emulate it, or for some reason you've got an Atari laying around with a copy of this, or you see a copy at a retro game store. I'm sure it's cheap. Pick it up. You'll have some fun with it for a minute and then never play it again. So until next time, have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.